Hi, and welcome to Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving, a podcast series by Tharaka Foundation focused on youth mental health. Before we begin today's episode, I just wanted to let you all know that all content that is found in our podcast is created for informational purposes only. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, treatment, or therapy. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard in this podcast. Thank you so much, and without further ado, let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving. It's your host, Seerat here, and today we will be interviewing Julie Lythcott-Haims. She's the author of four books. My two favorite are the New York Times best-selling book, How to Raise an Adult, and her third book, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult, which has been rated as a remarkable guide into adulthood. She's a public speaker, and her most famous talk was at TEDx about how to raise successful kids. Without further ado, Julie, let's hear from you. What would you like to add?
Hi, Seerat. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I just love the fact that you've read two of my three books. I'm blown away. I guess what I would add is my middle book, Real American, on what it was like for me to be Black and biracial growing up largely in white communities. And I'm 56, so this was, my childhood was a long time ago, but that's a book that is about identity, it's about belonging. It's about the journey so many of us are on for different reasons to ultimately love and accept ourselves with the ancestry we have, the skin we have, the hair, the way we speak, our family, this sort of journey to self-love, which is so important if we're ever going to have good mental health, if we're going to be able to be in loving relationships with others, really starting from a place of I'm okay with myself, I know myself and like and love myself. I think that's it's really important. So anyway, for anybody who's listening who might be interested in that journey, this is a very vulnerable book, a lot of stories, just story from my earliest childhood into my late 40s, my experience from this, not loving myself to ultimately loving myself. So wanted to put in a plug for that.
Well, I like reading stories, so I will definitely order that book after.
Thank you.
So, today with Julie, we'll be exploring the idea of thinking big. Thinking big means thinking beyond getting into a top 10 Ivy League university. It's thinking about our character and the impact we can make on the world. In Julie's book, How to Raise an Adult, she shares about Sid Dalby, admissions dean at Smith College. Dalby said this in one of her talks, and it stuck with me. If there's a 5 to 10% chance of rain, do you wear your raincoat? No. But if people hear 5 to 10% chance of admission, they don't assume they'll be part of the 90 to 95%. So why do parents and children care so much about getting into the top 10 Ivy League university? And why do they always assume they're in the 5 to 10% that gets accepted?
Well, why do they care so much? What a big question. I think they're not aware that America has over 3,000 accredited 4-year colleges and universities. So if you're not aware that we have 3,000, if you think maybe we have 300 or 200, you might think, well, 200, I better pay attention to the top 20 because that's, 10% of them. But the numbers are just off. In a country with 3,000 places you could go to for college, the top five, the top 10% of 3,000 is 300. The top 5% is 150. So I think people are simply not aware of how many options there are in America. So they think there's only 10 that matter. I would say there's actually 150 that are great, which is the top 5% of all the colleges and universities. Okay. So it's a numbers problem, it's a perception problem. Some people have emigrated here from countries where there were only two or three or five colleges and universities that were really excellent. And so in those countries, you have to, if you want a shot at a professional career in life, a certain status, you've got to go to one of those small number of places. It's just not true in America. So I think it's a lack of information and a misperception, perhaps based on information from elsewhere. But there's also information right here that it reinforces the myth, and that's the ranking system. US News and World Report thinks they are putting all of America's university, or the top the top 5 to 7.5% in some rank order, and universities are just not things you can really adequately rank that way. They tend to rank based on the incoming GPA of the freshman class and the incoming test scores of the freshman class. That has nothing to do with what do they offer there? What are they teaching? How good are the faculty? What kinds of opportunities are there to learn outside the classroom? They're not ranking the quality of the experience at that place. They're really ranking the inputs, the what are the people they're admitting look like. So it's just a flawed system. Anyway, I think it's flawed, I think it's problematic, and I think it's harming kids and parents. And why do people think they're going to be in that 5 to 10%? Because we like to think if we work hard enough at it, we'll earn it. And there are a lot of kids in your town and mine and around the country who are working their tails off to get the right grades and get the right scores and be in the top 5%, 5 or 10%. It's part of what childhood seems to be about in this country these days. And kids are in pursuit of those outcomes that I just think are narrow and problematic.
That's interesting because even before you mentioned that there are 3,000, I've been thinking there's like 10 colleges that are actually good. Rest are just mini, like,
Oh,
village colleges. So
no, not at all. When you get a book, if you go to your favorite bookstore or library and you check out a book on America's best colleges, it's going to list about 150, 200 of them, and they're all worth reading about. Remember, 150 to 200, that's going to be 5, 7% of all of them. Okay.
that's cool. So adding on to the previous question, why should we think big and how does it help us? So, like, and what long-term impact does it leave?
Well, let me push back and ask you, what do you mean by thinking big?
Well, in my definition, thinking big is thinking beyond just going to like a good school. And like I said, it's like thinking about our character and the impact we make and thinking about like our passion and what we want to do rather than just making money and getting a paycheck.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So thinking big. So I appreciate that definition. Focusing on getting to a certain school is a very narrow pursuit. Like, if I just do this and it works out, I'll be fine. I think the bigger way to think is, what qualities and characteristics do I need to possess in order to be fine? And let's say more than fine. I want to be successful. I want to have an impact. So I think for me, I turn it on its head. It's not about the school you go to, it's about the self you bring to whatever school you attend. You have to know how to work hard. You have to know how to get back up when you fall. Falling, fumbling, messing up is natural. Don't be embarrassed and ashamed for too long. Learn from it, get stronger. How you treat other people is so important. When you treat other people with kindness and dignity, it's good for them, but it's also good for you. It makes you feel good about yourself. It also, when people watch you behave in that kind way, they're more likely to offer you a job or offer you, some kind of opportunity you want. So your character, which is how other people feel around you, it's not just sort of the right way to be. It's actually useful for you to be of good character. The world will open itself to people of good character. And often this pursuit of the right school is, not only is it narrow, it's a requiring a focus from young people before they even know what they want to focus on. So I'm a former Stanford dean. I was working with 18 to 22-year-olds who were trying to figure out what to study, what to do for grad school or for work, who to be. They were grappling with that in their late teens and early 20s, and many people grapple with it far longer. The notion that you in 8th grade should already know your passion, right, is absurd. I think it's absurd. Okay. I think you're supposed to play, which is how you learn how to interact with humans. You're supposed to be involved in activities and maybe sports in order to develop a sense of responsibility, accountability, persistence. You're supposed to do your homework and talk with your teachers and get better and better at solving problems and producing at a level that's, higher and higher. These are all attributes that are going to make you a successful person in the world, no matter which one of these many, many colleges you go to.
That makes sense. What I'm understanding is that if you focus on the character, which is like the roots, then the tree would flourish instead of like focusing on watering the leaf. So, how can we think big and what are some steps that we can take right away? And then after that, how do we know when we're thinking big and when we're on the right track?
Oh, great questions, kid. I'm writing this down. I think it comes down to one's definition of success. So I think you're thinking small. In order to know how to think big, I think we have to know what thinking small looks like. So I think what we've said is thinking small is I am only good enough if I get into one of these 10 colleges or even 20 colleges or even 50 colleges. Because, right, I've said the top colleges in America, there are 150. Anyone who's thinking smaller than that, I think is thinking small instead of thinking big. And I think their definition of success is being determined by society, right? I will be successful if I go to one of these 10 places or 20. That's a message society gave you. You weren't born thinking, "Oh, I really want to go to one of those 10 or 20 colleges." Somewhere along the way, living where you do, going to school where you do, with the family you have, the friend group you have, the media you pay attention to, you got the message success is one of these 10 or 20 places. I think success is should be a definition that comes from within. And it is do I know what I am good at? Do I know things I love to do? Okay. How do I know who I am? My identities, my quirkiness? Do I really know myself? What am I good at? What do I love? Who am I? When you put together the Venn diagram overlap of that, you that's when you start to figure out this is what I should be doing for work. This is where I should be living. These are the people I want to be in community with. And I know, being out here 56 years old, when humans figure that out, here's what I'm good at. Here's what I love. Here's who I am. And they work hard at doing more and more of those things, they feel successful. They're like, I love my life. I'm doing what I want to be doing. I feel really challenged and enriched. I belong here, right? That's the kind of internal, that's like a juicy feeling you want to have, like, yes, I am living my life, the life that makes sense for me based on who I am, what I'm good at, and what I love, right? That is thinking big. Let me just add, if I may, I'm sorry I'm long winded, but you do it by like paying attention now at your age. Which courses really excite me? I want to stay after class, talk to the teacher. I want to maybe ask if there's extra reading I can do. Is there a project I can take on? I love this stuff, right? It's not going to be everything, it's not going to be most things, but hopefully along the way, as you go through high school, there is that one thing where you're like, oh my gosh, can I do more of this, please? And don't let anyone tell you that that thing is frivolous. And often it's art or it's theater or it's a sport or it's a niche little subject in biology that everyone else thinks is weird. Like, no, 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 that's the clue you're looking for. I'm good at this. I love this. I feel this, right? That's the kind of passion that authentically is emerging from your experience. That's what we want to encourage you toward, even if one of those top 10 or 20 colleges isn't interested in it. I would say to heck with them, you be you, and you're going to succeed.
That's cool. I liked the idea of like the juicy feeling and the Venn diagram. That's from like the Venn diagram from the identity, who am I, and what I love. And this actually perfectly
What I'm good
relates.
at, what I'm good at, what I love, and who am I? You got to be
Okay.
good at it and be capable of working hard to get better at it if it's going to be your career. Okay. What you got to, right? You're not going to be successful if you're not, haven't figured out something you can be good at.
Okay, so the Venn diagram is my identity, what I'm good at, and then what I love. And
Yes.
what's in the middle is what you call juicy feeling. I've also heard it being called as passion. So,
Yes.
so how can we distinguish when some things are passion or it's a hobby? Because for me, sometimes I have a great passion, and the moment like a challenge walks in the door, I throw my passion out. So, how do we know if we should overcome these challenges or just move on to something else?
Mm. Um, Passions are interests that we have that are typically challenging. Um, we yearn to grow and learn as humans. We yearn to do things with our brains and do things with our hands and our bodies. We don't thrive sitting on the couch just mindlessly watching the same thing. We want to be stimulated. We grow and feel good when our brains and bodies are stimulated. And so I want to say that the passion thing, when it comes with a challenge, when some problem crops up and you want to just throw it to the side, I would say, no, no, no. These problems are opportunities to learn and grow and to be more competent and ultimately master it. Now, there's some problems like, this person is treating me really badly, and I don't care how much I like this stuff we're doing. I can't tolerate being treated this way. So I'm going to leave that because I need to protect myself. I think that's a valid reason to say I'm not going to do that. But if it's like, wow, this is hard, I don't know if I can, I'm afraid that I won't be amazing at it, push through that, do the work. And you may not be amazing at it the first time. You may not be amazing at it the second time, but you might be the fifth time. And that's what we're trying to do is grow you to be more capable by doing the work, the hard work of trial and error, effort, persistence when things go badly. That's how you get to this place of, really being successful.
So it reminds me of figuring out when it's unsafe and versus when it's uncomfortable.
Nice.
Yeah. So how do we design our life? Our audience are students who are in school. So how can young minds take charge of their life and think big? And one quote that relates is like it's easier to build strong children than fix broken men. So what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, um, well, the first thing I want to say is um, I want everyone listening to be clear. This is your life. It sounds obvious, but what I mean is you are not like a pet. Like you might have a cat or a dog. Those are pets and they're taken care of by humans forever. Okay. You will be loved by humans forever, we hope, but you are not a pet. You are becoming this independent individual who is going to lead your own life. So you want to be thinking, am I learning to do more of the stuff of life? Am I learning to look after my body, my belongings? Am I starting to be responsible for money, spending on things, saving for things? Am I keeping track of my own deadlines? If I forget stuff, am I figuring out what I'm going to do about that next time? The older you get, the more we want you to have agency, which is the sense of I can do things, I'm responsible for doing things, as opposed to someone else does things for me. Okay. So, where might this crop up? It can crop up in is someone else telling you you have to be a doctor, you have to be an engineer. Well, maybe those people value those things. Are those the only careers that matter in life? No. I want you to be curious. Do I think I want to be a doctor? Do I think I want to be an engineer? Or are there other subjects that are making me feel that juicy feeling of like, oh, I love this stuff, right? The older you get, the more important it is for you to be deciding what you're studying. When you have extra room in your schedule, I'm going to take this because it lights me up. It makes me feel enthusiastic. More in charge of your own thinking, more in charge of your own lives. By eighth grade, you ought to be waking yourself up with an alarm clock. You ought to be able to make some breakfast for yourself, maybe pack a lunch for yourself. It's nice if parents can do these things, but you want to know, hey, no, I'm capable. You want to be learning to take public transportation. You want to be, able to talk with the grown-ups in your lives about like the teachers or the school administrators or your coach. You want to be able to go into stores and buy things, ask for help when you need it, and how to raise an adult. I'm talking about all the skills you're going to need to have when you get out to the world, whatever college, university, workplace you're in, you're going to need to be able to, you know, talk to strangers, not be afraid of all the strangers, but like know how to respectfully talk to people, ask questions, get your answer, without being afraid. And so that's what I want y'all to be curious about. Like, am I in charge of myself? What are the ways in which I'm not? And you know what? Frankly, you don't want to hear this probably, kids, but chores are a great way to develop responsibility. Like, can I take on a few more jobs around the house? If you were to say that to your parents, it would blow their minds. Hey, folks, I want to develop responsibility, and I think I should be responsible for a few more things around here. I'm already doing the garbage and recycling. Can I be responsible for starting to do my own laundry? They would be blown away by the maturity and by the, how can I help? Because chores build a work ethic. Chores make you more capable of, you know, being that responsible, hardworking adult out in the workplace. So that's an example.
Yeah, I like the part where you said like building life skills. So I'm in eighth grade. You mentioned a lot of things that eighth graders should do. So for example, you mentioned like chores. Like I do that, but some things I don't do, like make my lunch and breakfast and all. So I'm gonna be implementing those after this. And
I love it.
yeah, so this was an awesome podcast. So how can our listeners learn more about you and your work?
I appreciate that so much. Well, my website is julielythcott-haims.com. That's my name, my full name without the hyphen.com. That's where you can learn about my books and what I believe in more broadly. On social media, I am J Lythcott-Haims everywhere. J, first initial, last name, no hyphen, everywhere. I also write a blog I call Julie's Pod, where I try to observe the world around me and vulnerably report on what I'm experiencing. That's at jlythcott-haims.substack.com. So those are some examples of where you can find more about me. My TED Talk, I hope you'll put a link to my TED
Yes.
Talk, Seerat, in the show notes or however you promote this, because I think that's a talk that I would love for kids to see.
Awesome. We will put the TEDx link in the description below. So thank you so much, Julie, for being the architects of our young next generation's minds. I truly enjoyed discussing with you today, and I hope we bump into each other soon.
I look forward to it. I'm going to come to your house and sign that book. So look forward to doing that. Thanks for listening, everybody.
You are listening to Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving, a podcast series by Tharaka Foundation. As part of our youth series, we will be releasing new episodes every Friday, so make sure to continue to check those out. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and thank you so much for listening.